Welcome back, I'm Brick Waffle, and this is the Hearts of Iron 4 tutorial series. We're going to pick up now right where we left off with the production menu. Production is how you equip your military. Now, we're using the improved production UI mod, which allows you to assign factories in groups of 5 or 10 for easier control of large late-game countries. Trust me, if you ever play a major country in 1945, you will love this. Now, you'll need at least one factory assigned to each item that you want to produce, and each additional factory assigned to a production line increases the rate at which you produce that item. The order of these production lines is your priority. If you ever lose access to military factories, they will shut down from the bottom up. And you can see which ones are operational versus not operational by the ones that are green versus grayed out. Now you can shift-click the trash icon at the top to cancel all production lines, or just click one of those to cancel one production line. But be warned, every production line has an efficiency associated with it, and if you trash it to start over, that efficiency starts back at 0 instead of whatever it is currently. Production growth is how quickly your production lines increase this rate. Production cap is the maximum efficiency for your lines, and production retention is how much efficiency that line retains when you switch what it produces. In this production UI, military factories produce infantry equipment, tanks, and aircraft, while dockyards produce ships. You can produce any equipment that you've researched or received through licensed production diplomacy from this screen. Some equipment requires you to design a variant before you can produce it, specifically tanks, ships, and aircraft. All of these are very similar in that they require XP to save the design, and the options available are based on your completed research. To use the tank designer, click Build Armored Vehicles, and then pick one of your chassis and click Create Variant. The tank designer allows you to create custom tanks by picking a chassis and then adding or removing equipment to get your desired result. And tank stats are broken into 3 major categories: base stats for their speed, reliability, and rate of supply use, combat stats for their effectiveness against various unit types, and miscellaneous stats that don't fit into either category. Generally speaking, you want your tanks to be at 100% reliability so that they don't break down when they're moving on the battlefield. Reliability directly affects the amount of attrition your tanks will suffer per hour. The rest of your stats really depend on what kind of enemy units you're designing your tank to combat. Soft attack is useful against enemy infantry and light vehicles. Hard attack is good against armored targets, like other tanks. Piercing directly counters hardness. And breakthrough improves the defense when you're attacking. Defense improves your defense when you're defending. And I know that's a lot of saying defend 3 times, but that's how those stats work. Air attack is how much damage it can do to enemy air wings. Be sure to pay attention to the production cost of a tank when you're designing it, as expensive tanks will take much longer to produce. Some weapons can even enable new roles for your tank. So for example, giving it a heavy weapon will allow the tank destroyer role, which gives them increased hard attack. And eventually equipping flamethrowers lets you pick the flame tank company role, allowing them to be added as support companies for other units and provide increased attack and rugged terrain. The aircraft designer works very similarly. You can click Create Variant as well to create a new aircraft. This is based largely on the aircraft's size and their main armament. Giving them fighter weapons, like we select here, will make them a fighter. Picking naval bomber weapons will make them a naval bomber, and so on. You can also create carrier variants here. For example, this carrier, it's missing a main armament, but it has the carrier icon, so we can click that one and give this a fighter weapon, for example. And if we had 1 experience point, we could save this as a carrier fighter. In the Naval Designer, you can select Create Variant on a ship hull to create your own variation of a ship design. This again works very similarly, but be warned that if you're part of the London Naval Treaty, you have a limit on the production cost of certain types because that historically limited the production of super heavy battleships. Now with all of these designers, you can click Auto Design and it will pick the best components available using the AI's preferred rules. If you have one that is a lower tier, for example, you can click Auto Upgrade and it will automatically improve that module to the latest version. Again, all of our designs require experience points to save, so this can be very difficult to do early game, and you'll want to get into combat or exercises to produce that XP. You can recruit and train divisions for your armies by selecting division templates. Like the tank, aircraft, and ship designers, you can tailor your division templates to your liking, creating all-purpose troops or highly specialized ones as needed. Like with the equipment designers, modifying division templates takes experience, so don't expect to create your perfect divisions on day 1. The main area of the division template is for your line units. So if we click Edit here, we can see this section is all of your line units. The number and type of units here determines the division's overall stats, which you'll see on the right. Support companies on the left side of the designer modify the stats of those line units. Now, keep in mind that support companies almost never modify the speed of a division on the move, while similar line units, support artillery versus line artillery for example, force the division to move at the rate of the slowest unit in it. In those cases, it's a trade-off of a more effective line unit at their primary job, or a smaller support company that allows the unit to move faster. It's important to note here that special forces such as Mountaineers, Marines, and Paratroopers have their own cap that unfortunately isn't easily visible in the interface, but is dependent on the size of your army. Once that cap is reached, you can't produce any more units that include special forces, so don't try to add these to your regular divisions. The other thing to keep in mind is that divisions require all of the equipment in their template to perform effectively and suffer penalties when they're missing any. It can sometimes be more effective to have a large number of divisions with few support companies or other unique units than to have a fewer, more specialized ones. Now, combat width is an important factor when designing your divisions. This determines how much of your division can actually face off against an enemy in battle. Terrain, research, doctrines, national spirits, and so on can all modify the combat width available for a given fight. Generally speaking, you want to aim for combat widths in multiples of 20 to have the most effective units, and support companies do not affect combat width. As you have excess political power, experience, and command power, you can add command officers to apply bonuses to your entire Army, Navy, or Air Force. You can also add branch spirits that modify your officers as they're recruited and/or level up. And from this screen, you can also invest in doctrines that apply across each branch and modify all of your divisions in that branch. You can eventually even apply favored tactics that apply across your entire country. Notifications will appear at the top of the screen when something happens at the game that you should act on. Do you need to care about these? Well, usually yes, but not always, as we'll see in just a moment. For any notifications you don't want to resolve, you can right-click them and they disappear. When you first start a game like this, there'll be a number of these notifications that you should address one by one before unpausing. No national focus set will appear whenever you're not currently pursuing a national focus. Remember that you have 30 days to pick one of these without penalty, so you usually don't need to pause just to pick one. When time is passing, you can think about which one you'll pick next and so on, so you don't have to make everyone in a multiplayer game wait when your current focus finishes. Research will appear when you have a free research slot. Again, you typically don't need to pause to pick your next research, as you have 30 days to pick one of these without penalty too. Free civilian factories means you have factories that aren't dedicated to trade and aren't building anything. You can use these for constructing things in your provinces. Free military factories means you have factories that aren't dedicated to a production line. And dockyards means you have dockyards that aren't dedicated to naval production. Now, decisions available means you have a decision that you can take, and you have the political power available to do so. Sometimes these are important events that can shape your entire game, such as Russia's political paranoia mechanic. And be sure to at least mouse over the icon to see which decisions you can take. You can always turn off decisions that you don't want to be notified about, clicking the green button next to them in the decision window. The Unassigned Divisions button means you have divisions that aren't assigned to an army. Missing equipment production means that you're not producing something that your divisions require. Remember that divisions without all of their required equipment suffer significant combat penalties. Air wings with no mission or region assigned will show up anytime you have an air wing on the battlefield with no orders. Insufficient resources will show up whenever you don't have enough of a resource to produce equipment that requires it at full efficiency. Not enough manpower or equipment to fulfill our garrisons will show up anytime you need more troops or equipment to suppress resistance in your occupied territories. No divisions in basic training will show up whenever you're not currently training any divisions. The We Are at War icon is the exception. You can't dismiss this one, and this shows you your current war statistics. There are a few other UI elements that we should cover. With the pause and speed controls, you can pause by clicking the date, or change the speed of the game with the plus and minus buttons. Most players are going to want to go at speed 3 in multiplayer, slowing down to a 2 in a complex war. Generally speaking, you don't need to pause to deal with most of what's going on, and quite frankly, you'll annoy your fellow players if you do. You really should only pause if you're about to start a war, and you want the host to save just in case, you have a unique timed event, or you're picking an important focus that might lock you out of options for the rest of the game. You can turn the music on or off from the music note icon near the date. And the Army, Navy, and Air Force icons allow you to quickly see a list of all of your units in each of those types. This can be very helpful when trying to merge fleets, move aircraft, or find unassigned divisions, for example. The globe shows the current world tension, which is a limiting factor on a lot of national focuses, decisions, or even interactions, such as creating or joining factions. And that's going to do it for this video. In our next one, we'll start talking about organizing divisions, giving them orders, and moving things around on the battlefield.